is over here.
Yes, I'd like to direct my question to Mr. Perot. What will you do as president to open foreign markets to fair competition from American business and here at home from foreign countries so that we can bring jobs back to the United States?
That's right at the top of my agenda. We've shipped millions of jobs overseas, and we have a strange situation because we have a process in Washington where after you've served for a while, you cash in, become a foreign lobbyist, make $30,000 a month, then take a leave, work on presidential campaigns, make sure you got good contacts, and then go back out. Now, if you just want to get down to brass tacks, first thing you ought to do is get all these folks who've got these one-way trade agreements that we've negotiated over the years and say, fellas, we'll take the same deal we gave you. And they'll gridlock right at that point because, for example, we've got international competitors who simply could not unload their cars off the ships if they had to comply. You see, if it was a two-way street, just couldn't do it. We have got to stop sending jobs overseas. To those of you in the audience who are business people, pretty simple. If you're paying $12, $13, $14 an hour for factory workers, and you can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25, that's assuming you've been in business for a long time, you've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor, have no health care, that's the most expensive single element, making a car, have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement, and you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south. So if the people send me to Washington, the first thing I'll do is study that 2,000-page agreement and make sure it's a two-way street. One last point here. I decided I was dumb and didn't understand it, so I called a who's who of the folks who've been around it. And I said, why won't everybody go south? They said, we'll be disruptive. I said, for how long? I finally got them up for 12 to 15 years. And I said, well, how does it stop being disruptive? And that is when their jobs come up from $1 an hour to $6 an hour and ours go down to $6 an hour, then it's leveled again. But in the meantime, you've wrecked the country with these kinds of deals. We've got to cut it out.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. I see that the president...
Yes, we are back in the middle of the second hour. It is 7:28 in the PM on Friday, January the 5th, 2024. The future is here, everyone, and it's not looking so great. In the intro there, that was one Mr. Ross Perot talking about the giant sucking sound. He was made fun of and ridiculed and mocked for making that statement in 1991-92 when he was running for president against George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Now everyone looks at him and goes, wow, that dude was a prophet. That man was indeed a prophet. Wow. He was actually talking about a trade deal that was in the works called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And that agreement came to force on January the 1st, 1994. So exactly 30 years ago. So we've had 30 years of NAFTA. And what do we have to show for it? Not a whole lot, folks. Now, NAFTA actually superseded the 1988 Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement between the United States and Canada. So it was there to replace it. The impetus for a North American Free Trade Zone began when U.S. President Ronald Reagan made it a part of his 1980 presidential campaign. So just like everything terrible in our society, it pretty much started with Ronald Reagan. Now, after signing the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement in the 80s, the administrations of George H.W. Bush, Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari, and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney agreed to negotiate what became NAFTA, barriers to trade and investment between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. by establishing the principle that U.S. corporations could relocate production elsewhere and sell back into the United States, NAFTA undercut the bargaining power of American workers, which had driven the expansion of America's middle class since the end of World War II. The result has been 30 years now of wage decline and upward redistribution of wealth and political power, as well as we talk about every week here on this show, how much richer the rich are getting. And we're definitely going to do some more stories about that, because some new studies have just come out about how rich the super rich are getting. And I give you a hint, it's obscene. Now, mostly NAFTA affected us in this country in 4 ways. First, it caused the loss of 700,000 jobs as production moved to Mexico. Most of these losses came from California, Texas, Michigan, and other states where manufacturing is concentrated, like the Midwest, where we live. Now, there were some job gains along the border in service and retail sectors resulting from increased trucking activity, but those gains are pretty small in relation to the losses and are in lower paying occupations. The vast majority of workers who lost jobs from NAFTA suffered a permanent loss of income. NAFTA strengthened the ability of U.S. employers to accept lower wages and benefits. So it gave these companies the ability to essentially bend their workers over a barrel. As soon as NAFTA became law, corporate managers began telling their workers that their companies intended to move to Mexico unless the workers lowered the cost of their labor. In the midst of collective bargaining negotiations with unions, some companies would even start loading machinery into trucks that they would say were bound for Mexico. Wow, that is... Oh my God, that is just out and out dastardly. The same threats were used to fight union organizing efforts. The message was, if you vote in a union, we will move south of the border. Listen to this now. Between 1993 and 1999, 64% of American manufacturing firms in those industries used that threat, and by 1999, that rate had grown to 71%. So even by the late 90s, American workers were essentially petrified of losing their jobs due to this horrific trade deal given to us by Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and later Bill Clinton, the son of Ronald Reagan. With NAFTA, corporations could also more easily blackmail local governments into giving them tax reductions and other subsidiaries. Now, we're talking about immigration as a very important issue, like I said in the segment from last week about what's ahead for 2004. Immigration is going to be a huge, huge issue, and NAFTA is a big part of the reason for that. The destructive effects of NAFTA on the Mexican agricultural and small business sectors dislocated several million Mexican workers and their families, and was a major cause in the dramatic increase in undocumented workers flowing into the United States labor market. This put further downward pressure on American wages, especially in the already lower paying market for less skilled labor. This is why people like Coretta Scott King in the early 90s went to Orrin Hatch, a Republican, and begged him to do something to stop illegal immigration. She said you have to stop illegal immigration because it is hurting the black community. Don't ever let white liberals and the colored people who love them tell you that illegal immigration doesn't hurt black communities. Vanderbilt University did a study and found it hurts black communities. Coretta Scott King organization did a study and found it hurts black workers. Barbara Jordan did the official American government study on it and found that it hurts American workers, particularly black workers, because we disproportionately make up low-skilled, low-paid work. Okay? So don't ever let nobody tell you that, you know, mass immigration, illegal immigration is good for the public. This is exactly why the right wing is making gains all over Western Europe and now America, because there is a contingency of brain-dead liberals who keep spreading this nonsense. Oh, you know, you're just racist. You're just a xenophobe. No, Franklin Roosevelt said every job in America should be done by an American for a living wage. Okay? That's, to me, the greatest American president. And one of the greatest civil rights leaders of all time, A. Philip Randolph, said that there shouldn't be any immigration to the United States until African Americans are fully enfranchised. I just heard the caller during Juan and Eve's show talk about the amount of resources that are being kept from black people to serve people from Venezuela and other countries who just got here yesterday. And you better believe that's real. And people in black communities all over America are waking up to this reality. I don't know if you guys have seen the polls lately, but Joe Biden has become historically unpopular with black people. And he can thank his buddy, the Clintons, for supporting NAFTA. And everybody who supported illegal immigration and sort of called illegal immigration or tolerated illegal immigration for a big part of that. I feel bad for what the Mexican farmers went through. And the Mexican factory workers at the maquiladoras that were exploited by American corporations as well. I don't want to make it seem like I blame them. I do not blame them. Those people are human beings worthy of dignity and respect. But we ain't got to let them stay here. You know what I mean? As the saying goes, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here. It just is what it is, folks. Sorry. Mexico lost nearly 1.3 million farm jobs between 1994 and 2004. Wow, that is crushing. The 2002 Farm Bill subsidized U.S. agribusiness by as much as 40% of net farm income. So they gutted the Mexican farmers' economy and forced them to come up here to basically undercut American labor. When NAFTA removed trade tariffs, companies exported corn and other grains to Mexico below cost. At the same time, Mexico reduced its subsidies to farmers from 33.2% of total farm income in 1990 to 13.2% in 2001. Most of these subsidies went to Mexico's largest farms. The changes meant that many small Mexican farmers were put out of business by highly subsidized American farmers, which again, you have a scenario where the corporate state is crowding out the little guy and destroying competition in order to monopolize whole industries, particularly vital industries like food. Now, one of the reasons NAFTA was so pernicious is because it was the template for rules of the emerging global economy, in which the benefits would flow to capital and the cost would end up going to labor. The U.S. governing class, in alliance with the financial elites of its trading partners, applied NAFTA's principles to the World Trade Organization, to the policies of the World Bank and the IMF and to deal under which employers of China's huge supply of low-wage workers were allowed to access U.S. markets in exchange for allowing American multinational corporations the right to invest there. We're going to have to talk about that as well. We're going to do a show on that at some point. PNTR with China, permanent trade relations with China in the 90s. Another one of the things that Bill Clinton did that was a betrayal to America's working class. It feels like I'm saying that weekly about the Clintons, about Bill Clinton in particular, but it is what it is. Between NAFTA, welfare reform, the Telecommunications Act of 96, and permanent trade relations with with China. I forgot he also didn't regulate derivatives and all those things that he was supposed to, like Brooksley Born warned him, because she told him that Wall Street were going to crash the economy within a decade if he didn't regulate derivatives, and if he didn't by getting rid of the regulations on Wall Street, getting rid of Glass-Steagall. And he did not listen to Brooksley Born. He listened to Larry Summers, Robert Rubin, and Sandy Weil. And you guys saw what happened in the late 2000s. The economy collapsed because of all the things those people had done. So, again, Bill Clinton has been a subject on this show of the men who ruined America, rightfully so, because he is as much of a villain as we've had in modern history as a president. NAFTA itself signaled that the Democratic Party, which was supposed to be the progressive side of the U.S. two-party system, had accepted the reactionary economic ideology of Ronald Reagan. Amen to that. This is what I tell you guys on a weekly basis. The old days where you could assume that the Democrats were the good anti-war, pro-labor, pro-union, pro-working class, pro-black people party are long over. They have not been that way since the Clintons took over the party in the 90s. The very last old school Democrat there was, which was Bernie Sanders, they have beaten him into a whipping post, and he is now toothless and pretty much worthless in whatever it is he's doing at this point. Now, after Donald Trump took office in January of 2017, he sought to replace NAFTA with a new agreement, beginning negotiations with Canada and Mexico. In September of 2018, the United States, Mexico, and Canada reached an agreement to replace NAFTA with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, and all three countries had ratified it by March 2020. NAFTA remained in force until USMCA was implemented in April of 2020. Canada and Mexico notified the U.S. that they were ready to implement the agreement, and the USMCA officially took effect on July 1st of 2020, replacing NAFTA. The new law only involved small changes, and it's important to remember that, right? Donald Trump ran on getting rid of NAFTA. He ran on bringing back Glass-Steagall. He lied. He basically lied. And there is a strain of sort of anti-establishmentarianism in this country that says, well, the elites hate Donald Trump, right? And so since the elites hate Donald Trump, then I'm going to support Donald Trump, because if they don't like him, he must be doing something right. And I understand the impulse. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I understand the enemy of my enemy is my friend as an impulse, as a political strategy, but it's the wrong political strategy in dealing with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is an elite. He is an establishmentarian. And this shows you right here, the USMCA is basically NAFTA with minor changes. That's it. That's it. Donald Trump basically made no changes to NAFTA. He didn't even talk about bringing back Glass-Steagall, keeping commercial banks and investment banks separate when he got to be in power. Now, I will say he didn't start any new wars. He's the first president in my lifetime to not start any new wars. So I give him credit for that. But other than that, for the most part, Donald Trump maintained a status quo. The status quo of Obama, the status quo of George W. Bush, the status quo of Bill Clinton, the status quo of George H.W. Bush, which is all the status quo of Ronald Reagan, with NAFTA being ultimately the legacy of Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, implemented 30 years ago this week, crippling American workers ever since. And leaving nothing but destruction in its path. All right, folks, when we get back, we're going to pay tribute to another legend that we lost. Seems like we're losing music legends on a weekly basis, but this man was a very, very underrated talent. Stick around to see who that is. We'll be right back here on My Country with Scott Cannon, Issues and Answers Friday. Stay with us.